Good evening, everyone. We're going to give it just a few more seconds. It's always fun seeing that number tick up and up and up and up and up and up. Good evening, good evening. All right. Well, we will go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Karina Carpenter. I'm one of the Associate Directors for the Office of New Student and Family Programs. We're really excited that you decided to join us tonight. And we know there's other things going on. There's a Duke basketball game right now. We were just talking about that too. But tonight we're here to talk about all things career. And we have our wonderful colleagues here from the Career Center. We have Rachel Coleman, the Director of the Career Center for Development and Education. And then we have Greg Victory, the Executive Director of the Duke Career Center. So today we have a PowerPoint. We're going to go through some slides. If you happen to have been a family that joined us for Family Weekend and went to the career presentation there as well, some of the content is the same. And so just to put that up front for you. And also, if you have questions about your own child's individual or your own student's individual journey, this is probably not the best platform for that either. So we'll share some contact information at the end. Make sure you get connected and get the answers that your student's looking for. But we won't be able to answer direct questions that you may have. How to get your questions, though, to our panelists. We do have the Q&A function on and ready for you. That is the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen, not the chat. So the chat is not working. That's not what we want to do. We're using the Q&A function. So feel free to put any questions that you have for our panelists in there. We'll be answering them live and then also answering some at the end as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for being here.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to just put these slides on. Oh, hold on. Let me do this the right way. This is modern technology at its best. So, okay. So, good evening, everybody. As Karina said, my name is Greg Victory. I'm going to jump in first, and then we'll hand it over to Rachel. And before we jump into the real details, I want to give you a little framing about how we approach the concept of career services, career readiness at Duke. And that's really with the belief that it's a responsibility of the university to help us support the career readiness of Duke students. And that means we approach this as seeing the Career Center as sort of the center of that ecosystem, that we are the curators of content. We are collaborators with faculty and staff and student groups and organizations across campus. And then we believe that our responsibility is to grow the support and resources that Duke students have to navigate some of the questions that they are interested in, to test out internships and summer experiences, to explore career pathways in graduate and professional schools. But in essence, it really takes a village to do that. And we believe really strongly in that we can't be the only place where students are getting the support. In fact, we know the research shows that they're talking to faculty members, they're talking to each other, they're talking to their families about the decisions that they're making throughout their time at Duke and beyond. And we do this approach from three sort of guiding principles. And those guiding principles really are about this idea that the content that we share, the resources that we develop, the tools that we build are relevant. How are we making sure that we're connecting students to growing employment trends and opportunities? You know, there's a lot in the world talking about AI. What do those particular jobs look like? 5, 10 years ago, social media jobs, influencer wasn't a job, right? Social media was a part of somebody's responsibility. So how are we staying on top of those particular trends and providing guidance? One of our best resources are Duke alumni and helping us stay up to date. We have an employer relations team that really helps us think about how do we connect with our employer partners to build and sustain relationships. How are we visible, right? Our resources, our tools, our programs, our staff visible across campus. So you'll see us at places that are not just career specific. We'll participate in events and panels and programs that we collaborate on. We show up at different parts of the institution, just so students see us as friendly and approachable faces. So we'll work, the last day of class event. We'll work the first day of class event. We'll serve pancakes at midnight breakfast because we want students to see us as engaged partners and collaborators in the process. And inclusivity, right? We see ourselves as champions to a campus committed to the career readiness, success, and inclusivity of our students. In order to do this, we want to make sure that our tools and our resources and our team are inclusive, that when we represent the variety of opportunities that you have as a Duke student, as a Duke graduate, that we're showing alumni who have different career paths that have approached that from different places. Just a quick example. So I was just peeked in on a virtual session we were doing around career clarity, really focused generally on some of our earliest students. And there were alums there who were talking about the fact that one of the reasons they loved Duke was because they could study sociology, they could take classes, they could get engaged. But those alums sat in all different roles, came from different majors and different programs and experiences. So we can say to students, there's not one pathway, there's multiple pathways for you to be successful at Duke. Just a few things that we think is important to know, and you probably know this, but this frames how we do our work, that we know that 86% of students from a poll in 2019 from Strata and Gallup reported that getting a better job represented how they chose to come to college, why they made a college choice, what that college choice was. And I'll say I've worked at 6 other institutions before I came to Duke, and we do this better than anybody else, right? There's ravenous group, and ravenous in the most positive sense of the word, of alums who want to help students navigate the world of work and opportunities beyond that. But we know that first year students are walking in the door, asking questions about internships already. And I will say to you, we are very clear with them to say, take a deep breath, get settled, relax, connect. And then let's talk about your first summer, what that might sort of look like. In fact, one of our policies is we don't do one-to-one advising appointments with first-year undergraduates until November 1st. And then we open the floodgates November 1st, and they show up on our schedules. Just a little context, these are your children, so you have a good sense of this. But there's a couple pieces that I think we really pay attention to. My favorite data point here is when asked what drives their job selection, graduates say the most important factors are contributing to the greater good, work-life balance, and compensation. I always, as a Gen Xer, giggle a little bit about work-life balance. I came from an upbringing where it's like you got to work to have a life. But these are the things that students are talking to us about. Many of them, we know the research will say they'll have a full-time job and a side gig. They're really thinking about, how do I contribute to the world in a really positive way? Increases in students interested in climate and energy and sustainability, students interested in public policy, students interested in psychology and its application to mental health and making changes in the world. 1 out of 3 don't know what type of career they want. We love that. We don't want them to come in track. We want them to explore. You'll hear me often say to students, your career is what you look back upon the day you retire. It's not what you set out to do. These are not going to be professionals that are going to spend 30 years at the same company. They're not going to spend 30 years in the same industry. It's likely they'll have 3 or 4 industry changes and 7 to 10 careers before the time that they graduate, right? More than half of them expect to do a job that doesn't exist today, right? And what they're getting at Duke is this opportunity to build a toolkit of resources that they can use to navigate their future, to test out some of those particular options and opportunities, and to be able to make those decisions over and over again. And Rachel will talk about that a little bit as she talks about our career development process. And I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Greg. So one of the things that we do when we work with students is we really focus on the concept of career readiness. That's how we incorporate competencies and guidelines and information, resources to help students understand, how does it all fit together? All of these puzzle pieces that make up their Duke experience, how does it all come together to inform their next steps after they graduate? So we're going to talk a little bit about the competencies that we focus on, and some of the tools and the processes that we encourage students to use as part of their time at Duke. So the first thing you're going to see up here on this slide are the National Association of Colleges and Employers, what they call their career readiness competencies. And we use these a lot at the Career Center to help students understand how they can take their academic experience, the experiential learning that they participate in, and really formulate that in terms of career readiness. So there are some things that the Career Center can help them with in terms of, career and self-development, professionalism, those kinds of things. And then there are other competencies that they're going to get through their coursework or through internships, the different experiences that they may have. But these are really helpful because this information comes from employers. They contribute to determining what the top career competencies are that they're looking for periodically. So we know that when we tell students this is a guide for them of this is what employers are looking for. Obviously, it's going to get more nuanced with different fields, different industries. The technology piece in particular can look very different depending on the sector and the type of role that the student is interested in. But generally speaking, this is a good framework for students to use to think about skills and competencies they can develop that are going to be broadly applicable to a wide variety of employers. And then a couple of years back, a labor of love was putting all of this together into a process. So we know what the competencies are, we know what the skills are that we're trying to get students to develop, but what is a process that they can follow to, in fact, develop those competencies? So our team got together, did a lot of research, did a lot of benchmarking, and came up with our own career development process. And this is something that we use with students in just about every interaction that we have with them. It is not designed to be linear, but it gives them phases and stages to go through in terms of preparing for life beyond Duke. It is not linear. Students may come in and out at different parts of the process, but you'll see that know yourself is the first one on here, and that's intentional. It's really the cornerstone of this entire process. We want to make sure that whatever decision students are making, it's an informed decision. So it's based on their values, their interests, their skills, their goals, their motivations, the things that are important to them. And we're kind of using that as the foundation for the entire process. So as we use tools at the Career Center to help students better understand themselves, we have a variety of career assessments and inventories that help students identify their strengths, their interests, even things about their own personalities, values clarification tools, all of these things to really help them better understand themselves so that they can start to carve out a pathway or several pathways that align with that. Once we have a better sense of the student and kind of what they're interested in, what's important to them, then we would encourage moving on to career exploration in terms of what's out there that seems to align with that information about themselves. So if they know that it's really important to them to have, some financial income for whatever reason or another, what types of opportunities seem to align with that? And then moving forward, we really want to help students create a plan to get there, a flexible plan, knowing that there's always going to be aspects of this process that we can't control, right? We're seeing some challenges with the economy right now, like those variables are always out there. So we work with students to help develop flexible, agile plans that they can use as they're moving through the rest of this process. So focusing on the things that most closely align, taking action to get there, and then once they've done so, reflecting back on that experience and thinking about what they've learned. Because this process, as you can see from the infinity symbol, it's lifelong, right? Like we're going to go through this process many times throughout the course of our lives. So we at the Career Center really want to help students develop the skills to be able to do this. And that's kind of the emphasis of this process is skill development, understanding different phases that they can go through, and they can revisit as often as they need to. So just a couple of highlights of things that we do. Obviously, there's the things that most people are familiar with, right? We do career fairs, we have those kinds of services so that students can engage with employers, and that's really important. But there's a lot of other things that we do as well. So we have a career influencers network that is made up of faculty and staff at Duke. And this goes back to what Greg was saying earlier when we're talking about this idea of career everywhere for everyone. We really believe in an ecosystem of support. So the Career Influencers Network helps to develop a shared language across the institution. It helps students understand that they can go to a lot of other people to get career advice. But there's a common philosophy that guides the campus and how we help advise students. A lot of our programs, the vast majority of the programs that we do are collaborative in nature. So we're partnering with the Alumni Association, or we're partnering with academic programs or student groups. And that's with the idea of making sure that what we're doing is relevant, and that we are giving students access to the broader Duke network, so that they can build their community while they are a student and have access to that as an alum. We're going to talk about Spark a little bit later on in this presentation, so I won't spend too much time on that. But one of the things that we'll talk about, and I'll share with you in a future slide as well, is our website. Also something that we're pretty proud of because we spend a lot of time on. But the idea behind that was to have content related to career development, job searching, the more tactical elements about resume development, interview preparation, and to really have that information available 24/7. We recognize that the Career Center is always going to have limited hours, and students need this information to be accessible to them. So one of our goals was to move the Career Center and the staff away from being kind of gatekeepers of this information and have it so that students can access it when they need it. So this can be career videos, it can be tools, it can be interview prep, it can be information, it can be the job board, but just to really make sure that students have access to what they need when they need it. Another change that we made a couple years ago was we switched our team model to be more of a career community model. The majority of our career communities are industry-based, and then we have another one that is focused on discovery and exploration. So this is more for students who are still determining what they want to do, and that career community really focuses on skill development and exploration and things of that nature. But what's nice about the career community model is that we have these curated resources pertaining to these different industries, and students are able to be a part of as many communities as they would like. So they have a variety of different interests. Let's say they're interested in business and engineering. They could be a member of both career communities so that they're getting that information. So we're pretty happy with that information because it is customized towards these different interest areas. And that's another way that students can get access to that information 24/7. We also have a variety of technology tools. Handshake, I'm going to pull up in a future slide. But that is our main tool in terms of places for students to look for jobs and internships, sign up for advising appointments, register events, that kind of thing. Big Interview is a tool that we brought on board in the last couple of years that helps with interview preparation. It uses AI to give students feedback, can help them really build a customized interview practice depending on the industry that they're interested in. And anecdotally, I've had a lot of students tell me that it's very, very helpful, one of the most helpful tools that they've used. InnerStride is specifically for international students. So it is built by international students for international students, has a networking tool in there. They do a lot of great webinars on understanding visa, CPT, OPT, making the most of those experiences, building your network. So it's really a robust resource with a lot of good information in there. We have over the last few years really increased our internship funding. So we have an internship funding program for unpaid or low paid internships. And we've been able to increase funding over the last several years to support more and more of those internships. And then post-COVID, we're seeing a return to on-campus recruiting and record attendance, which is fantastic because the more recruiters, employers we have, the more opportunities for students. So we are fortunate at the Duke Career Center to have an employer relations team that focuses specifically on building those relationships, new business development, those kinds of things, constantly seeking out employers that our students will be interested in the areas that they're interested in. So we were very excited to have record attendance at our most recent events. Okay, so one thing that I will share in the chat is our website. Most of the information on there is public facing. So the vast majority of it, you don't need a login to be able to go to that information. But you would find on here a ton of what I was just referencing in terms of the career communities. You can see that kind of in the upper part of the screen. So any career communities that your student may be interested in, they'd be welcome to join those career communities. And that way they're getting that curated information sent to them on a regular basis. Our career development process is there. And what's nice about the career development process on our website is you can click on any of the different aspects of the process and it will take you to more information. It even has suggested activities, reflection questions, things like that to kind of prompt the student for where they may be in the process and then give them some ideas for how to move through that part of the process. We've been talking about career readiness in terms of the NACE competencies and really what we focus on in the Career Center. That information is on our website as well. And we also have our who we serve. So information that is curated based on the student's grade, where they are at their class year, whether they're a master's student, doctoral student, undergraduate student. So again, trying to group information based on what's going to be most relevant for that student. And then Handshake, I said Handshake is our main tool for where we would encourage students to check out jobs and internships, where they can sign up for an advising appointment to meet with a career advisor to talk about their specific situation. Our event registration in terms of career fairs, other programs, things like that, largely go through Handshake. And it is a very robust tool. We had another tool a few years ago, and Handshake has many, many more employers coming into it. It is one of the most popular platforms used at higher education institutions. So I would say most employers are familiar with Handshake. So they know how to use it. It's pretty intuitive, so students can figure it out pretty quickly. They can go in and complete their profile in this system, which we very much encourage, because the more their profile is filled out, the more information they're going to get that's relevant to their interests and what they're looking for. So we encourage students to keep this profile updated. That way they're getting jobs and internships that are related to their area of interest, to their major, those kinds of things. We don't, kind of advise Handshake as the only tool for these kinds of things, but we definitely recommend it as one source of really great opportunities and great information.
Thanks, Rachel. And the only thing I'll add about Handshake is one of the things that I think has been really beneficial at Duke is it is utilized by most of the schools and colleges across the institution. So it may be somebody who wants to list a position in the divinity school or a position in the environmental school that might be appropriate for both graduate students in the Nicholas School, but also undergraduates in Trinity. It used to be different formats. So, a company would come in and they'd have to maybe post in 3 or 4 different job sites to get Duke students. And we've tried to coordinate that in a way that we make it really easy for employers to post internships and job opportunities. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about what do we know about the outcomes of our students. I'll be really transparent that this is not something historically we had a lot of really good data around. I mean, I think there was a lot of anecdotal data of Duke students do well. When we look at the data, we know that within 6 months of graduation, 90% of students say they were fully employed or continuing their education. Over 50% of our undergraduates do some sort of mentored research experience before they graduate, and nearly 90% of all undergraduates have completed at least one internship. I think if we change the language a little bit and we talk about summer experience, that's going to be closer to 100%. So some students don't see research with a faculty member as an internship. They don't see our Data Plus, Code Plus, Climate Plus, Story Plus programs as an internship. So part of the thing we're talking a great deal about, particularly for our first year students, is it's not about that internship in a way that you think it is. It's how do you spend the best use of your summer and have some sort of summer internship or summer experience that will help you have more clarity around, hey, here's where my interests are. Geez, I really thought I wanted to do that research in a lab and I did it this summer and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Or, I really believe in this particular social impact and I'm going to work for this volunteer organization for the summer and really get to learn more about that and see how I can have an impact on those particular outcomes. So if we change the language, I think those numbers significantly increase. Top 5 industries, very broad. industries, computers, IT technology, finance, financial services, business and management consulting, healthcare and medicine, science, and or research. That's where we know we're 85%. We can guarantee we know almost 85% of where they landed. And that takes a lot of work from our team to gather that data. The goal in the next couple of years is to push that well over 95%. We're working with our institutional research colleagues to have even broader data. 5 states where they end up, North Carolina is number 2, right? Lots of great opportunities. The triangle is booming. Some students stay and work at the university or at Duke Health. Not unusual that it's New York and California, particularly as a number of our students come from those geographic locations. Lots of good work. There's a huge alumni contingent in DC, in greater DC, and then Georgia, lots of that based particularly in Atlanta. And then just to give you a sense of just the large numbers of access that students have, right? So more than 1,000 employers hosted events, either multi-school events or Duke-specific events over the past year, allowing students to do virtual events. Some of those are in person. Some might be consortium events. So we do events with other schools in the state of North Carolina for our master's and doctoral students. Rachel just hosted an event last week for North Carolina students who identify as neurodiverse and employers who are interested in recruiting and supporting neurodiverse students. We do a joint career fair with Georgetown and other schools around careers in public policy and social impact. We do a career fair in the spring with our Ivy Plus colleagues. So we really are looking at as many ways as possible to give students access to as many opportunities as we can. There were 5 unique employers in 22-23 across 7 career fairs. That's 500 unique. That's not duplication. That means they have access to employers in the environment and energy and finance and consulting, consumer goods and IT and all over the place. They have an opportunity to engage. And then 35,000 jobs and internships were posted for Duke students in Handshake. So there is a bevy of information. To Rachel's point, that's why we really encourage them to fill out their profile, because if they don't, then they all get 35,000, and that's really certainly can be overwhelming for students in that particular job and internship process. And as Rachel said, like, we do our best to also point to say, here's specific places where you often find internships in a field. So we have a lot of students interested in the sports industry. That can be really complicated to navigate and figure out where are they finding. So we'll find people on LinkedIn who are often posting weekly internships, and how do we connect our students to those opportunities as readily as possible.
So we're going to touch on very briefly where you all can come into the picture. So as Greg was mentioning, there's a lot out there for students. There's a lot that the Career Center does. There's a lot of career information outside the Career Center, online, friends, their network. So, it's almost possible that students can get bombarded with information, and they just need a place to kind of process it and talk through it. And think about what it means to them. So listening is a fantastic way to support your Blue Devil, is thinking about ways that you can be there to be a listening ear, to be a sounding board for them as they are trying to figure out what to do with all of this information, helping them to think through different experiences that they've had at Duke, just talking about the classes that they've participated in, the events that they've attended, any experiences that they've had, and just what did that mean to them? Did it validate something? Did it change their thinking about something? So just being kind of a listening ear for those types of experiences can be really helpful as they make meaning from those different experiences that they have. Being ready, being open, these things all kind of go together. Thinking about how different the workforce is now, the workforce that our students are going to be entering, right? It's very dynamic. It's always changing. We're seeing the influence of technology on this. So the jobs that these students are going for may not exist yet, or they might change pretty dramatically. So we have conversations with students about having to create their own pathways, right? It can be a very different workforce and a different economy than even what we experienced 10 years ago. So being open to recognizing that this is a dynamic workforce. It is a dynamic world of work that students are entering, and we kind of have to be ready and agile and be very open to creative possibilities, because there's a lot of things out there that are forthcoming with the advances in technology and how it's shifting the way we work. Being supportive, again, recognizing that students are going to have a variety of different interests, especially in their early years at Duke, and that's a good thing. Just encouraging them to try lots of different things. We use the analogy sometimes of thinking about Duke as a lab, as a place to experiment, as a place to try things. We don't need to hyper-focus very early, right? Like, let's explore. That's the beauty of a liberal arts institution, is getting to try lots of different things, learning about different areas of the world and different subjects, and just really that experimentation process. And then again, that listening, supportive, what does that mean to you? What do you take from that? Be a partner with us. If there are, different suggestions that you have or ways that you think that you could support the work that we do, we would definitely love to hear from you. Again, Career Everywhere, we embrace an ecosystem approach. We know that the Career Center is not going to be the sole source of this information. So we are always happy to partner. If you work for an organization that wants to recruit Duke students, we want to hear from you. So all of these things are ways that you can be collaborative partners with us, and we would love that. And finally, remembering that it's their journey. Again, going back to what I was saying before about how different the world of work is now, even from when I was in undergrad or when I finished my master's program, like, I can't apply that same logic to what they're experiencing now, because it's just a very different workforce. So we want to be able to be supportive and remember that their journey is going to be different than what we probably experienced, and just be as supportive and encouraging as we can. And I'm going to turn it over to Greg, who has a couple more resources that are particularly relevant.
So I just want to, remember it's their journey piece. You all know these are your kids, right? And you've got them this far and want to see them through and want to see them succeed and support them in that process. They sometimes will come to you with this idea that's the first time you've heard. And one of the things one of our colleagues, Gary Bennett, the Dean of the Trinity College of Arts and Sciences, said to a group of us in August was, we want to be the student's mirror. We want to sit across from them. And if you listen to nothing else about what we do in the Career Center, these are the transformational conversations our team has, there are advisors in particular, about talking about what's sort of bouncing around in your head. The things that you're thinking about. You took this class and it was so amazing. You just couldn't stop reading and participating, and the discussions were really powerful. What do we learn from that? How do we unpack that? Is it something that maybe you want to explore more in the possibility of a major? Is it something you might want to figure out how you apply some of that in a practical way? But it's the piece that they sort of surface. And I think sometimes I feel the anxiety that you often feel as parents about, oh my God, are they going to get a job? They're going to get a job, right? And their first job actually may be horrible. They may hate it, but they're going to learn something from that that's going to make them better at their second job, right? And we're going to be there to support them through this process, hand in hand with you. But they're going to come sometimes, if you have first year students, they may come home at break and be a little bit different than they were when you dropped them off in August, because they've had exposure to things that maybe they've never witnessed before or thought about before. And it's exciting. And I think we're very focused on that exploration piece. Two promos. So if they don't know what they want to do and they're stressed out about it, I teach a course every semester. It's a half credit through our innovation and entrepreneurship program. It's using design thinking to really help them navigate their Duke experience. It is, I don't want to say it's an easy lift, but it's pass fail and a half credit. And all the work we do is related to helping them develop tools that they can use. So if they're coming to you and you say, I don't have this figured out and I feel like everybody else around me does, this is a good opportunity for them to sort of explore that. So I'll put that out. And Drop Ad is open all the way through the first couple of days of classes or the first week of classes. So they can always add that. I got tricky finger today with the slides. And then we're also doing events. So Rachel mentioned Spark. Spark is an initiative out of our Quad X program. It's geared towards helping students sort of navigate their early stages at Duke. And it started really focused primarily on sophomores as a way to re-engage sophomores as they return to Duke in their second year. We do a big event called the Spark Summit in August. And then we do this other event that's really more focused on career called Spark Your Career. January 8th. It's the Monday before classes start. It's the day before the kickoff of Duke Centennial celebration. More to come, but if you're thinking about booking return flights back to Duke, think about getting them in early on the 8th or before. But a great opportunity to sort of, in an afternoon, get a lot of really cool content. So we do resume reviews. We think about how do you make the most of your summer experience. I do a session on becoming a networking pro. We have headshots. We do an alumni networking reception. So it's a great opportunity to roll all those pieces into one. And then we will take questions. And it looks like there's a bunch of them in the Q&A. So I will let Karina lead us forward.
There are a bunch of questions. And so if you have others, let us know, put it in the Q&A, but we'll go ahead and jump right in. So a lot of questions about internships. So could you answer, where can students find industry-based information? Because we know it varies based on industry. What are some advice or resources that they can find information about where to find internships?
You want me to take this one?
Well, I can go, you can go, it doesn't matter.
It does depend on the industry, right? So Handshake certainly is one resource to find internships. They can go into that database and filter by internship and by the type of role that they're looking for. So I would say Handshake is a great place to start. And then also within our career communities, there's going to be information depending on the field or the sector that the student is interested in. So like I said, we know that Handshake is not meant to be the end all be all in terms of places to search. But when it comes to a great place to start, it is a good one because there's constantly new roles coming into their daily. And then I would encourage the student to look at the career community pages on Career Hub to look for more kind of nuanced, specific internship tools that might be posted there.
Karina, the only other thing I would add too is part of it is thinking about, sometimes there's this expectation that I have to have a specific internship in a specific industry. And what we encourage students to do is talk to alums who've been out just a few years about, what did I do in my sophomore summer? Because particularly in some of our STEM fields, there's a set of coursework you need to have or practical application you need to have. You're not going to get hired as a sophomore intern, right? In that particular field, because you just don't have the skill set to be valuable for some of those companies and organizations. They really are only going to look at juniors. So what can you do that's adjacent? What can you do to develop some of those skills in the summer? And that's why we focus on the summer experience. That's really going to then help you be the most competitive applicant in your junior year. So it's really helping people think about, there's always, I saw a question about the financial, investment banking. The reality is, oftentimes those students are hired for their junior internship before they have anything for their sophomore summer. It's just the way the process works. So what that says to me, and if you talk to the alums and recruiters we talk to, you don't have to have a sophomore investment banking internship to get a junior year one, because they've already hired you for your junior year before you've gotten a sophomore one. And there are fewer sophomore experiences. So if you think you want to try out other parts of finance or other parts of fields, test out other pieces. Don't sort of just narrow yourself in that one sector of one industry. How do I get adjacent skills where I build competencies, or adjacent experience where I build competencies and skills that make me then a more viable or marketable intern for my junior year?
I think along those same lines, is there a recommended timeline if a student is interested in having an internship, let's say this summer?
It is all over the place, right? In some fields and major organizations, those deadlines have passed. In some, they haven't even posted. So it's, within those career communities, we have some timelines, we're developing more, but that's a good opportunity for them to come in and say, okay, well, I really wanted to, I'm a sophomore and I really wanted to do X. And that timeline is passed, or I'm a junior. What can I do to get an experience that will be relevant, that will make me, a stronger applicant in other places? So it really, it not only depends on industry, it depends on the size of the organization. Do they have an established internship program? But it's really about like, how do we make the most of your summer? Let's not focus on, I have to have an internship at, if I'm a CS major at Google, Microsoft, Apple or whoever. There are lots of CS software engineering internships in all different industries and fields. And how do we look at those if maybe you missed that particular deadline for those organizations?
Awesome. Are there any resources for students like this coming spring, maybe careers fairs, anything like that, or anything that's virtual, thinking about students who are abroad right now? How can they get connected to different internships, different career fairs?
So they have access. I mean, the career fair piece, we'll have one in the spring at the end of January. It won't be as large as our fall one is because not as many people recruit. But that's a university-wide career fair, so we're working with all the schools and colleges to try to diversify the folks who come. But all of those study abroad students have access to our resources, right? As Rachel talked about, most of the stuff is online. We do advising appointments virtually. They can do advising appointments. I did one 2 weeks ago via phone because the student was studying in Rome and was on their way to Switzerland for the weekend. And we did a career advising appointment while I was a little bit jealous. I was a lot bit jealous. I was a little bit jealous. So those resources are there. I will say to you, as much as we talk about, there's been an increase in on-campus recruiting. If you had a child who went to college 5-7 years ago, like the on-campus recruiting thing is never going to be what it used to be. So most companies don't come to campus in the way that they used to. They're finding other ways to engage with candidates. And a lot of that is in the virtual space. They'll come maybe for specific things with a club or organization. But if a student sees that's abroad, that sees that company coming and they can't be here because they're abroad, then they should reach out to that recruiter, that company, and say, hey, I'm going to miss this, but I'm really interested in the other ways to engage with that particular organization. So it's really about that contact and making connection and not necessarily being specifically in that space, in that room. And all those organizations know that students study abroad. What is different at Duke is most of our students study abroad in the fall and not the spring. It's the opposite at most institutions from my experience, but that's because of basketball season, why they go in the fall and not the spring. But companies are used to that, and they want people with intercultural and global fluency. So that shows that, hey, I'm abroad, but I really want to sort of make connections.
So can you provide some real life examples of who is a part of the Career Influencer Network on campus?
Yeah, so and we actually it's visible. So if you go to the Career Hub website, which we put in the chat and is also up here on the screen, if you visit any of the career community pages, you will be able to see who's listed there as a career influencer. So the way that it works is a person is nominated to become a career influencer. So they can either kind of identify themselves, or someone else would note that they are someone who's particularly interested and willing to support the career space, the career development of students. And then we do some training with those folks, again, because we're trying to focus on this shared philosophy, shared language, so that it's consistent for the students, so that it's more beneficial for them. We're actually doing another one of these trainings with career influencers on Thursday of this week. So that's something that's ongoing, is they get kind of Career Center 101 as part of this training. But they are people who have actively engaged with students and having these conversations. They want to be a part of their career development process. So it's largely going to be faculty and staff, but you can see who they are actually on the website, and they're gonna differ depending on the career community. Some people have work experience in those different sectors, so that's something that they want to speak to, or they have been doing career advising before, either by nature of their current job or something else. But you can see examples of all of those folks on our website.
And sometimes there are folks who are like, look, a student comes to me and asks this question, I want to be better prepared. So we have a faculty and staff toolkit that helps them start those conversations. We have for first year and sophomores, we have particularly in Trinity, we have college advisors. We provide resources and training to those 300 college advisors who are having regular conversations with students about academic choice. How does that impact, some of the things they're considering and what they want to do. So don't think the influencer network is just those people that are listed. We haven't got to everybody yet. We're trying to get people to say like, hey, I do this. And some of our folks are a little more modest than others, and it takes us a few more invites to say, hey, I know you're having this conversation, because students talk to me about the fact that they flunched. If you don't know flunch, students can take faculty members to lunch and have conversations and learn from them. It's a great resource. I know you flunch with students all the time, so I need you to be in this career influencer network because you're already doing it. Let us recognize you for that good work.
We have 9 pages of influencers right now.
So does the Career Center advise on grad school, or like if a student doesn't know what they might want to do in a career?
Absolutely, yes. So I describe it as we're here kind of for the full range of career development, whatever that might be. I would say that a lot of the students that come in to work with us are in that exploration stage. They're not sure yet what they want to do. And that's a great place for them to come in and work with us. We say all the time, you do not have to have a plan to come to the Career Center. We're the place to come if you don't have a plan, so that we can help you with that plan. So we are strategy people, we are self-awareness building people, all of those things. So we are also career neutral. So if a student is, we're not going to advise a student to pick a particular career pathway, because it's really up to them and what's most important to them. So that might be graduate school. And then absolutely, we would facilitate that process of exploring different graduate programs and, again, understanding the students' values and what they're looking for in a graduate school. Is this going to help them get there? Is it going to give them the flexibility that they want, and so on and so forth. So yes, we're here for the full range. I tell students, if you think it remotely falls under career development, come to the Career Center. If for some reason it's not within our scope, we will make sure that we get you connected to the appropriate resource. But I would rather a student reach out to me and I can get them connected than for them to assume that we're not the place to go and then not know where to go. So yes, anything pertaining to their career and professional development, we would encourage them to come talk to us. They do not need to have a plan. They do not have to have it figured out. A lot of students who come see us do not, and that's why they're coming. So yes, it can be a job, it can be a gap year, it can be graduate school, it can be whatever they're thinking, and we are here to support.
Awesome. Can you guys talk more about the internship funding program and maybe some of the qualifications to apply?
Sure. So, there's some basic qualifications. There are hours. It has to be an unpaid or low paid internship, because that's how the donor funds have come in. When we review those, we review based on, is this really a good learning experience? Is the student going to get something? Have they made a clear statement about why this is important? What do they hope to learn from that particular experience? Are they getting good supervision? Are they actually going to walk away with a set of skills and competencies? So we're really looking at the quality of the internship and the quality of the application. I will say to this group, this is my number one fundraising priority. We don't have enough money to support every student, so we have to turn students away every single year. And that is, nothing pains me more than having to turn away an application. Financial need is taken into consideration when push comes to shove. It is not the only factor, but it is a factor because for some students, the financial barrier, and that's not necessarily just how Duke rates financial need. There are things that happen after you fill out that FAFSA form that impact your ability to support your son or daughter to experience one of these, we take all of that into consideration. But the end result is we don't get to fund everybody because it's not unlimited funding yet. But I am talking to people till I'm blue in the face to make sure it's unlimited funding and we can support as many students as possible. Applications should open in, I think, early January. We have 2 application deadlines. We will promote the living daylights out of it. One of our staff members, Leanne, this is her baby. She was at the Summer Experiences Fair a couple weeks ago promoting it. It will go out to a lot of places. If you're curious about it, you just search on the Career Hub. If you search internship funding program, all the criteria and deadline and information will be, if it's not been updated, it'll be updated shortly.
Is there coaching available for resume and for interview help?
Yes, we have a couple of different ways where students can get that type of feedback. We really recommend that they utilize our drop-in advising services, which are really great for application material review because they're quick, they're 15 minutes, you don't need an appointment. We do them every day in the Career Center, different times, but those are all posted on the website. So as long as students show up within that 2-hour window, they will be seen and they can get their materials reviewed. So they can absolutely do that. If it's the kind of situation where a student has lots of different application materials, so resume, cover letter, personal statement, all that kind of stuff, they can also schedule an individual advising appointment for that. That might be a little bit of a longer appointment. And we do have 15-minute application material review appointment types as well. So lots of ways for students to get that type of feedback on their materials. And interview preparation is similar. Again, we have that big interview tool, which we encourage students to use to kind of develop a baseline of where their interview skills are, because that system is really great for that. And then to come in and meet with an advisor to go through the areas of concern or places where they just need to talk it through with someone. We do practice interviews with students as well. So students can send in a position description that they're interested in and their resume. They can send that into an advisor, and the advisor will create a customized practice interview for that student. So that's why we require that information in advance, because we're not just going to give them a generic practice interview. We're going to really try to, as best as we can, knowing that we're not the company, but we're going to try to replicate what they might experience there. So we're going to do some research and we're really going to develop this tailored practice interview experience, and then we would give them feedback then.
Then there was a few logistical questions about Handshake. Can families log on to Handshake and see different opportunities, or is it only the students?
Just the students.
And then what timeline normally, should a first year fill out a Handshake profile?
Yeah. Okay. So they come to Duke with a profile. They don't have to create one. We create a basic one for them prior to their arrival. We let them know that. We remind them through emails and lots of different ways. We remind them in appointments or in drop-ins. So they should, if they fill it out first year, then it's just a tweak. Then they just update it moving forward. That's the same way we say, if you start with a solid resume and a good background, then it's adding and subtracting and highlighting different things throughout that particular process. So we encourage them to do that early. It's never too late. Students choose whether or not an employer has access. So I saw that question surface too. So they can choose whether or not their profile is public. If they make it public, employers can then search for them based on the set of criteria and information they put forward. So sometimes if their profile is public, an employer may reach out and say, hey, we're doing this virtual event at Duke, and you seem like you might be interested based on your profile. You should come check it out. And there's a lot, we'll work with students too, particularly around, here's how you use the tool. There's a safe search feature. So if you want to work in sports in Atlanta as an intern and get paid, you can narrow your search that way. And if you do that and save it, and let's say you did it on Tuesday night at 7:54, every Tuesday you will get you'll get an email from the system that says, hey, here's new internships that came out based on that criteria. So what we're trying to do with students is to get them to think about using the tools the way they're designed, So it creates less work for them in that process. And then they're really focusing on putting together materials and prepping for interviews in a way that's where they're putting their energy versus scouring through 35,000 opportunities.
Wonderful. We definitely have some families who are interested in the Spark. So is there a time where students should aim to be back on campus by the 8th for travel arrangements? When is Spark?
We won't start before 1 o'clock. There'll be some headshots in the morning. We're going to set up headshot booths in our office because those are super popular, but it'll be between 1 and 2 kickoff. We're just finalizing with our kickoff event. So we're going to do this really immersive, engaging activity with our colleagues in innovation and entrepreneurship about decision making and how apply it to, like, how do you apply that to career? Then they'll have an opportunity to participate in 2 breakout sessions, 45 minutes each, and then it'll follow with the networking reception with Duke alumni at the end. Super fun event, one of my favorite events each year. And again, it's open to any year, so it doesn't matter. We primarily see our largest audience our second semester, first year students, and then sophomores.
And then there's a question about frequency and kind of the path of how often can students come and have an in-person meeting. Can it be with multiple times? Is it usually Zoom, in person? Like how does that work?
I'll let Rachel answer this because I probably have a snarky way to respond. So I'll let Rachel.
I'll start. Yeah, so we do have some parameters in terms of what the system will allow a student to schedule. We encourage students to stick with 1 appointment per week. That doesn't mean that they can't come to drop-in advising, because that's not an appointment. You just drop in if you need some support with application materials or something of that nature. But the reason we encourage students to stick with 1 appointment a week is just to ensure that there's adequate open slots for all the students that need it. Just because the main Career Center supports so many thousand students, we just want to make sure that there's open spots for all the students that might need to get in and be seen with a career advisor. So our recommendation is 1 per week. And again, if they need to come in, they can come to drop-ins if they need something more than that. There is no set frequency. It really depends on the student. Some students will check in with an advisor once every couple of weeks, once a semester, once a year. It just kind of depends on what they're coming to the Career Center for. And it's not uncommon for maybe a student to come to the Career Center more frequently to start, just as they're getting things going and they're understanding the process and getting to know the resources, and then they'll kind of scale back from there. But we have 14 career advisors. We want to make sure that there's enough open spots for everybody to come. So that's the recommendation. And then Greg, if you want to chime in.
It's not therapy, right? So part of it is like, if a student comes to me and they show up the next week and they haven't done what they told me they were going to do, I'm going to send them back, because I'm like, you're coming here because you want to be committed to this. So you got to come with what you said you're going to come with, because there's really nothing for us to work from. So we try to get them to think about, like, what do you really need? I've had some students that they just need a coach. They don't even need a half hour. They just need me to sort of say, you got this, you're doing good, let's go forward. And we can do that in different ways. Like, I spend a lot of time, I see myself more as a coach, spend a lot of time with students, walking somewhere with them to say, you don't need an appointment. I'm walking to class, walk with me. We can figure this out in that particular process. So it's really figuring out their comfort zone, where they are. Like, sometimes if they're really deep into recruiting, it's navigating all those pieces, or they got a couple of job offers and they're thinking about how to negotiate or read through an offer letter. There may be some more frequency in that process. But to Rachel's point, and the other thing I'll say is, and I come with I should just come with a disclaimer as a human being, but in advising, I say to students, like, I'm not for everybody. If you don't like me, that's okay. There are 14 other colleagues who are amazing. You can test us out. What we don't want students to doing is saying, well, Rachel told me this, and Greg said this, and Grace said this, and Kay said this, right? So that you're trying to find somebody who's going to give you the answer you want. And we know that happens, and we talk, and we'll pull a student in and say, hey, talk to us about what's going on. We want to be supportive as much as possible. And I will say to you, I've been doing this a long time. This is the best team I have ever worked with. The depth of care for students and and their experiences is pretty powerful.
Wonderful. There are so many questions that we did not get to tonight. So families, please send your questions to familyprograms@duke.edu, and we will be sure to connect you to the Career Center to other, there's some other questions about academic advising and some other pieces too. We're happy to answer via email. Again, that's familyprograms@duke.edu. We'll help fan you out to get the resources that you need. Rachel, Greg, thank you both so much. This was so much fun. We really appreciate it. Families, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.